This Day in Sports History. This episode is brought to you by Firefly Books, and with you being a sports fan just like me, here's 2 suggestions for your next great sports read. If you love basketball, then you need to add Dave Zarum's book, NBA 75, The Definitive History. Uncover untold stories of triumph, controversy, and the greatest stars of the game. From the league's humble beginnings to its modern glory, it is a courtside seat to 75 years of NBA history. And if you're a golf fanatic, then you gotta check out Matt Adams' book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget. I've used it as a reference in this podcast over the past year for lots of stories that I've done, and I can tell you from experiencing it, this is a great book. Relive 50 of golf's most memorable moments through the eyes of the legends themselves. It's the closest you'll ever get to walking the fairways with the greatest to ever play the game. Grab your copy of NBA 75 or The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, available from Firefly, wherever you get your books. It's July 20th, and on this day in 1954, the career of a star tennis player came to an abrupt end. 1953 had been a fantastic year for Maureen Connolly. At the age of 18, she won the women's singles title at the Australian, the French, Wimbledon, and the U.S. Open, dropping only 1 set in the process to become the first woman and only the second tennis player ever after Dawn Budge to win the calendar year Grand Slam. Only 2 other women, Margaret Court in 1970 and Steffi Graf in 1988, have equaled that feat. Connolly had a unique attitude when she played. In her autobiography, she said, "I hated my opponents. This was no passing dislike, but a powerful and consuming hatred. I believed I could not win without hatred." She hit her forehand shots with power and precision. And after following up her stellar 53 season with wins at Roland Garros again and the All England Tennis Club, she was in a position to dominate women's tennis for the next 5 or so years. That was until this day in 1954. Connolly's second love, and in fact her original love, was horseback riding. She'd wanted to be a rider since she was a little girl, but her family couldn't afford for her to do it full-time, so instead she focused on her tennis and rode horses when she could. On this day, she was riding her horse near her home when a cement mixer truck passed by a little bit too closely. It spooked the horse and she was briefly trapped between the truck and the horse, and then she was thrown. In the process, she broke her right leg badly. It was a horrible compound fracture. After surgery and having her leg in a cast for most of the year, she attempted to come back in January of 1955, playing an exhibition match to test out her leg strength. In an effort to get to the net for a drop shot hit by her opponent, she felt a sudden, searing, sharp pain in her leg and immediately called it quits. She retired from tennis at the age of 20. She married later that year and resumed life as a wife and later a mother to 2 girls. She became an analyst for televised tennis matches, and she started a foundation to fund young players who didn't have the financial means to travel to tournaments. Unfortunately, tragedy stalked her again, this time in the form of cancer. In 1966, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and despite her fierce fighting spirit, lost her battle on June 21, 1969. At the age of 34. This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. Fellas, you've heard the phrase, look good, feel good, right? But why not add smell good to that too? That's where Sterling Soap Company comes in. First, Sterling Soap is 100% natural and has a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne. Second, there's a scent just for you. How about burgundy? Yeah, it's more than a color. The Sterling Soap folks blend natural essential oils with hints of mahogany, golden amber, and sandalwood. Or how about D503, an intensely masculine scent inspired by Legend by Mont Blanc. And third, you will feel good about the price. For just a little more than you'd pay at the grocery store, Sterling Soap will leave you feeling clean, refreshed, and ready for whatever's next. Give Sterling Soap a try today. Visit sterlingsoap.com. On this day in 1984, runner Jim Fixx died of a heart attack, and it was quite a shock for a guy who literally wrote the complete book of running and followed that up with a second book of running to die of a heart issue at the relatively young age of 52. Fixx is largely considered to be the Pied Piper of the fitness and running boom that began in the late 70s, so it seems a bit odd that it was just 50 years ago that running became known for its health benefits, but Fixx showed that taking up jogging and regular exercise improved your health. His 2 books on running were incredibly popular. He was the first to talk about a runner's high and how exercise in general improved your mood. The thing is, Fixx came to running a little later in life than a lot of people do now. He didn't begin regularly exercising until he was in his mid-30s, but he caught the bug and in turn caused a chain reaction, passing along his passion for running and exercise to a broad scope of people. His first book on running sold well over 1 million copies. Its famous red cover featured Fixx's muscular legs and profile. He followed that up with a companion volume a few years later. But he had had a family history of heart disease. His father died of a heart attack at age 43, and he had been a smoker earlier in his life. In the late afternoon on the 20th, Fixx went out for his daily run on Route 15 in Hardwick, Vermont. He collapsed and was unconscious when a motorcyclist found him by the side of the road. Attempts to resuscitate him were unsuccessful. It was later revealed he had an enlarged heart, and he suffered from atherosclerosis, with 2 coronary arteries essentially blocked. If he had survived, he would have needed immediate bypass surgery. Prior to his sudden passing, he'd felt fine, running several races of varying distance in the weeks prior, and he played a game of tennis with his sister the day before. On this day in 1976, Hammerin' Hank Aaron hit the final home run of his career. At this point in his career, Aaron was playing with the Milwaukee Brewers in a limited role as designated hitter. The Brewers were hosting the California Angels, and when Aaron came to the plate with 2 outs and none on in the 7th, he took a Dick Drago pitch into the left field seats for number 755. It was just his 10th of the season and what would be his worst year statistically. He hit just .229, and he retired after the 76 season. But despite the numbers, this is a historic home run, and it is commemorated. Milwaukee's County Stadium was torn down in 2001, but there is a plaque marking the spot where the ball landed in the parking lot of Miller Park. Now, a couple of interesting facts about this one. Bobby Bonds, the father of the man who would eventually surpass Aaron's all-time record, was playing right field for the Angels, and he watched Aaron's final 4-bagger sail out of the park. Barry Bonds was a few days away from turning 12. And the man who wound up with the home run ball was groundskeeper Richard Arndt. Arndt tried to return the ball to Aaron, hoping for a signed bat in exchange, but his effort was rebuffed. The next day, the Brewers fired Arndt for what they called theft of company property, meaning he was terminated for taking the ball home with him and docked the price of the ball in his final paycheck. But don't feel too bad for Arndt. He sold the ball in 1999 for $625,000. Let's go to the other end of the home run spectrum and talk about a guy who hit only 6 in his career, but there is a funny story attached to this one. So first, we have to go back to 1962, 7 years before the event that happened on this day. San Francisco pitcher Gaylord Perry was taking some cuts in the batting cage and sending some bombs over the fence in Candlestick Park. A San Francisco reporter took notice and made a comment to Giants manager Alvin Dark. "Hey, this Perry kid is going to hit some home runs for you, huh?" Dark looked at the reporter as if he had 4 heads and replied, "There will be a man on the moon before Gaylord Perry hits a home run." Fast forward 7 years to this day in 1969. Now, on July 20th, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin piloted the Eagle lander to the Sea of Tranquility, with Armstrong hopping down the ladder to put the first human footprints in the moon's dusty surface. The world looked on in awe. It brought tears to the eyes of stoic newsman Walter Cronkite. About 1 hour later, Perry stepped into the batter's box in the third inning against LA's Claude Osteen, and he sent one deep into the candlestick seats in left field for his first career home run, proving Alvin Dark to be a baseball Nostradamus. Now, obviously, people paid money to purchase a ticket for each one of those games. Well, on this day in 1858, it was the first time admission was ever charged for a baseball game. And I'm using the excellently written Why is the Foul Pole Fair by Vince Staten as my reference for this one. And he writes that baseball historians traced charging to watch a game back to a contest between the New York All-Stars and the Brooklyn All-Stars. Each person was charged 50 cents, and about 1,500 people paid to see the game, and that would be about a $16 ticket price in today's money. The game even had a newspaper writer there to chronicle the event for the New York Mercury. In 2007, it was a controversy that shook up basketball and even seemed to be the evidence that some needed to support their claim of the NBA being rigged. On this day, the FBI released information about an investigation involving NBA referee Tim Donaghy gambling on games in which he officiated. Donaghy had resigned as a ref 11 days earlier after evidence surfaced that he had been providing his co-conspirators with information about games and his manipulation of calls to push an outcome in a particular direction. When games went the way he said they would, he profited. It was not a good look for the NBA. Commissioner David Stern went into crisis mode, saying, "I have been involved with the NBA for 40 years in some shape or form, and I can tell you that this is the most serious situation and worst situation that I have ever experienced, either as a fan of the NBA, a lawyer for the NBA, or as a commissioner of the NBA." But were other officials involved? How deep did this go? Stern insisted that Donaghy went rogue and he had acted alone, cloaking his actions from the league and other officials. But seriously, could fans trust what was happening on the court? I mean, we all like to yell at the refs. We all see a bad call as some sort of favoritism to the other team. Star players get star treatment, right? But throw in a crooked ref, maybe a league full of crooked refs, and the entire credibility of the league comes into question. Donaghy pled guilty to wire fraud and transmitting betting information through interstate commerce, and he was eventually sentenced to 15 months in federal prison, serving 11. The NBA tried to become as transparent as possible in the months following, calling out mistakes by officials after games and even replaying the final minutes of a game between Miami and Atlanta when Shaq was rung up for his 6th foul when it was really his 5th. Fortunately for Stern and the NBA, a couple of other sports stories, such as Mike Vick's dogfighting trial and Spygate, knocked the story to the back pages of the sports section and off SportsCenter for the most part, and the controversy drifted away. On this day in 1983, former Heisman Trophy winner Billy Cannon was denied entry into the College Football Hall of Fame. So, a few questions here. First, what qualifies a person for Hall of Fame induction? Is it simply what they do on the field? Or does character matter? What about legal troubles that happen decades after you've finished playing? Billy Cannon was a 2-time All-American running back at LSU back in the 1950s. He led the Tigers to a national championship in 1958. His Halloween run punt return against an undefeated Ole Miss team in 1959 is still shown at LSU games. And he won the Heisman Trophy in 1959. In 1983, he was elected to the College Football Hall of Fame, but when he pleaded guilty to felony counterfeiting, his nomination was withdrawn. The board that made the decision said that Hall of Fame candidates must not only be great players, but also good citizens. Cannon had been a part of a $6 million counterfeiting ring, printing $100 bills. The College Football Hall of Fame would reconsider its qualifications for induction, and Cannon was eventually inducted in 2008. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Napoleon Bonaparte was once attacked by a horde of bunnies. He had requested that a rabbit hunt be arranged for himself and his men. When the rabbits were released from their cages, though, the bunnies turned and charged toward Bonaparte and his men in an unstoppable onslaught. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.